My name is Rachel Donovan. I'm 28 years old. And the night my sister-in-law turned my bedroom into a punchline for 12,000 strangers, I was sitting at my desk in the dark with 3 monitors glowing. 40 minutes into a fraud trace that would eventually save a hospital system in Phoenix $3 million. She posted the reel at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I know the exact time because my phone screen lit up while I was cross-referencing wire transfer records, and the preview was enough to make my stomach go hollow. The caption read, "Point of view. Your 28-year-old sister-in-law has been working from home for 2 years." The video was 90 seconds long. She had filmed it that afternoon while I was sleeping, the only hours I had to sleep, and she had done it quietly enough that I never heard her come in. Blackout curtains pulled shut. 3 monitors sleeping on standby. Empty energy drink cans lined up on the windowsill like evidence at a crime scene. My desk chair. My external hard drives. My headset. She panned across everything slowly, then turned the camera on herself and shrugged with a grin that said, "See what I live with?" My brother saw it within the hour and shared it to his own account. "Freeloading has an expiration date," he wrote. "Rent's due, sis," his friends reacted with laughing emojis. A woman from my mom's church group commented, "Some people just never grow up, honey." My mom liked that comment at 10:03 p.m. Then she liked the original post. I read every word. I watched the reel twice. Then I screenshot everything: the post, the caption, the comments. My mom's like, my brother's reshare, the timestamps, and I saved them in a folder I had been quietly building for a lot longer than any of them realized. I did not reply. I did not text anyone. I went back to the fraud trace, finished my shift at 7 in the morning, and drove 40 minutes to the apartment I had already signed a lease on, in a building near the river, where nobody knew my family's version of me. Here is the version they had been telling themselves for 2 years. Rachel sleeps all day. Rachel stares at screens all night. Rachel has no real job, no real income, no real future. Rachel eats the food, uses the hot water, takes up the good parking spot, and contributes nothing to a household that deserves better. Rachel is a 28-year-old cautionary tale, living proof that some people never figure it out. What they never asked about, not once, in 2 years, was what I was actually doing behind those blackout curtains with 3 monitors running until dawn. I worked nights for a litigation support firm based in Chicago. My job was financial fraud analysis. When insurance companies suspected large-scale billing fraud, when law firms needed forensic accounting on corporate embezzlement cases, when hospital systems discovered someone had been rerouting vendor payments for 3 years, my team was the one building the paper trail. I traced shell companies. I mapped transaction networks. I documented evidence precise enough to survive depositions and jury cross-examination. The work required silence and focus and irregular hours, because the clients were on East Coast time, and the data never waited for morning. It paid better than anything else under that roof. But I had kept it quiet, because explaining fraud analysis to people who had already decided I was a punchline was not a conversation that went anywhere useful. Silence was cheaper than the argument. Or so I told myself for 24 months. The house itself belonged to my grandmother on my mother's side. She had owned it outright since the 1980s, paid it off the year my mother was born, and kept it maintained and current on property taxes with the same quiet discipline she brought to everything she cared about. When she died 2 winters ago, people assumed the house would pass to my mom the way things usually pass in families, through noise, entitlement, and whoever cried the loudest. They had not read the will. My grandmother had watched the adults in our family carefully for a very long time. She had watched my brother expand a landscaping business on borrowed money and borrowed confidence. She had watched my mother float between decisions like a leaf that needed someone else's current to move. She had watched my sister-in-law treat generosity like a right and gratitude like a burden. And she had watched me, for years before she got sick, show up the way other people didn't. I drove her to appointments. I managed her prescriptions. I sat with her during the nights when the pain was bad enough that pride stopped working as an anesthetic. She noticed who was present and who was available only when something was being distributed. The will divided the house equally between my mother and me. Not to my brother, not to my sister-in-law, not to the household by default. 50% to my mother, and 50% to Rachel and Donovan, to be held jointly with right of survivorship, with both parties required to consent to any sale, transfer, or significant alteration of the property. My mother had signed the estate documents at the attorney's office without reading them carefully, the way she signed most things, trusting that someone else had handled the parts that required attention. She did not tell anyone what the documents said. I suspect she either forgot or didn't understand what co-ownership meant in practice. My brother and his wife moved into the spare bedroom 8 months later, during a stretch when the landscaping business had a slow winter and money was short. Nobody asked me. I was already there, already sleeping during the day and working at night, already invisible enough that decisions were made around me like furniture. I had stayed because it was my house too, and because leaving before I was ready felt like conceding a fight I hadn't agreed to have. So I stayed, and I covered things quietly, the way I had learned from watching my grandmother do it. I was on the utility accounts because I had set them up years earlier when my mom was between jobs and the gas nearly got shut off. I was on the homeowner's insurance because when the policy lapsed during the first year of probate, I had called and reinstated it using my own card. I had co-signed my brother's equipment loan 18 months ago, a $45,000 note for a truck and a trailer and a snowblower with a commercial engine, because the bank required a guarantor with verifiable income, and my brother had asked me at dinner with the kind of casual confidence that assumes family is always available for financial exposure. I had also been listed as the registered agent for his LLC since he formed it, because he had no idea what a registered agent was, and I had explained it in a way that ended with me doing it instead of him learning. I had done all of this without applause, and increasingly without acknowledgement, until the night my sister-in-law filmed my bedroom and taught 12,000 people that I was the family's dead weight. The morning after the reel posted, I sat at the kitchen table in my new apartment and drank coffee in a room that was completely, peacefully quiet. No television running in the next room. No passive-aggressive commentary about the dishes. No sound at all except a bus going by outside and a pigeon on the window ledge who had no opinions about my life choices. I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet I had maintained for 2 years. Every household account. Every payment. Every date. Utility bills, insurance renewals, the water heater replacement I had paid for the previous spring when my brother said he would handle it and then forgot. The LLC registration renewal I had filed on his behalf in January. The certificate of insurance I had obtained for his biggest contract, a commercial property in the suburbs that required annual proof of liability coverage, because he had called me in a panic 2 days before the deadline, and I had pulled it together in 4 hours. I stared at the numbers for a long time, not with rage, with something much colder and much more useful. Then I made a list of everything I needed to do. I was not going to sabotage anything. I was not going to interfere with anything that wasn't mine to touch. All I was going to do was stop volunteering for a role nobody respected and everybody depended on. I called the utility company and requested that my name be removed as the primary account holder. I called the insurance company and told them I was no longer the contact for the homeowner's policy and that the account needed to transition to the other owner of record. I emailed my brother's business insurance broker and informed them in writing that I would not be renewing my role as the administrative contact for the Bennett Grounds LLC policy and that any future correspondence should go directly to the policy holder. I called the bank that held the equipment loan and asked what the process was for removing a guarantor from a co-signed note. They told me there was no automatic removal process, but that the guarantor could submit a written request for review, particularly if the primary borrower had made all payments on time for at least 12 months. He had not. He had missed 2 payments in the past year, which I had quietly covered from my own account, because a default would have affected my credit too. I documented those payments and submitted the removal request anyway. Then I called Margaret Chu, the estate attorney who had handled my grandmother's probate. I had spoken with her once after the estate settled, briefly, mostly to confirm that I understood what the co-ownership meant. She had been patient and careful, and had told me at the end of the call that I should come back when I was ready to exercise the rights the document gave me. I had put that conversation away like a tool I wasn't prepared to use yet. I was prepared now. Her office had the kind of calm that belongs to spaces where things are decided rather than argued. Old oak furniture, a bookshelf organized with the seriousness of someone who respects what books contain, a window that faced a courtyard where nothing dramatic ever happened. Margaret was already at her desk when I came in, and she looked at me the way people look when they've been waiting for a conversation to start for longer than the other person knows. She pulled out my file before I finished sitting down. As co-owner, I had the right to demand contribution from the other owner for all shared expenses, including property taxes, insurance, and maintenance costs. I had the right to petition for a partition if we could not agree on how to manage the property. And I had the right, as 50% owner, to provide notice that any occupants beyond the named owners were residing there without my written consent, which, under the terms of the estate documents, was required for any long-term occupant who was not the co-owner herself. My brother and his wife had never obtained my written consent. My mother had invited them without asking me. That was not a technicality. That was the document doing exactly what my grandmother had written it to do. We also discussed the registered agent situation. When I submitted the revocation of my status, my brother's LLC would enter a grace period to appoint a new registered agent. If he failed to do so within 60 days, the state could administratively dissolve the business. He would not know this was coming because he had never bothered to understand what a registered agent did in the first place. Margaret asked if I wanted to leave room for a family conversation before she sent anything formal. I thought about the real. I thought about my mom liking the comment from the church woman. I thought about my brother's caption. I thought about the 47 people who had shared the original post by the time I woke up the next afternoon, including 2 people I had known since high school. I told her to send the notices. That was a Friday. By Sunday afternoon, my phone had become a different object. It started with my sister-in-law, who texted at 12:04 p.m. with a message so carefully worded it was almost impressive. Hey, so Marcus got something in the mail about the house? Can you explain what that is? When I didn't respond, she tried again at 12:31. Rach, this isn't funny. It says you have to consent to them living here? Since when? My brother called at 1:15 and left a voicemail that started calm and lost structural integrity about 40 seconds in. He had received a letter from the insurance company informing him that the homeowner's policy account was under transition and that he needed to establish new billing arrangements as occupant. He had also received a notice from the registered agent platform informing him that my status had been submitted for revocation. He did not fully understand what the second letter meant, but he understood enough to be alarmed. Call me back, he said at the end. Whatever this is, we can figure it out. Just call me. I was in the middle of a case review for a pharmaceutical billing audit, and I let the voicemail sit. My mother called at 2:47. She didn't leave a message the first time, or the second. The third time, she did, and her voice had the particular quality of someone who had spent the previous hour being informed of things she had never bothered to understand. Rachel, I don't know what you've done, but your brother is very upset, and I think you need to come home and explain yourself. This is not how we handle things in this family. She paused. Also, the gas company sent something. I don't know what it says, but it doesn't look normal. I saved all 3 voicemails. At 4:12, my brother sent a text that said, "The bank called. Something about the guarantor on the equipment loan? What did you do?" At 4:35, Diane says the business insurance broker emailed her. "They're saying you withdrew as contact? You can't do that." At 5:01, Rachel, answer your phone. The contract with Elmwood Properties requires proof of insurance renewal by the end of this month. That's our biggest account. If we lose it, we lose everything. At 5:03, please. I read that last one twice. Please was a word he had not used with me in a very long time. I put the phone face down on my desk and went back to the audit. The formal occupancy notice reached the house on Monday, delivered by a process server at 11:22 a.m. Margaret had been thorough. The notice identified me as the co-owner of record, documented the absence of written consent for the current occupants, outlined their options, which included either obtaining my written consent to remain or beginning a transition to alternate housing within 60 days, and provided her contact information for any questions. My phone became a fire alarm. I let 8 calls go to voicemail before I joined a fraud analysis briefing for a law firm in Atlanta. There is something almost cinematic about calmly walking a senior attorney through a network of fraudulent billing codes while your family is discovering, in real time, that the person they filmed sleeping as a joke is the same person whose signature is on the deed. My brother's voicemail at 11:48 was 37 seconds of disbelief, then fury, then something close to fear. The house isn't yours. Mom owns this house. You don't get to just decide who lives here. Grandma would never have done this. He paused. Would she? My mother's voicemail at 12:03 was quieter. That was worse. She had a way of going quiet when the ground shifted that I had learned to read as the moment she stopped performing and started actually reckoning. I didn't understand what I signed, she said. I need to talk to you. My aunt called from a number I almost didn't recognize at 1:30. She is the kind of relative who orbits family crises for observation purposes and enters only when she can position herself as reasonable. Sweetheart, she said, landing the word with the weight of someone who had rehearsed it. I think there's been a miscommunication. Marcus and Diane are very upset. Your mom doesn't know what's going on. I'm sure this can be resolved without lawyers if you just come home and sit down together. Miscommunication. I replayed the word the way you replay something to confirm you heard it correctly. A 90-second video of my bedroom, captioned to imply I was unemployed and useless, posted to 12,000 people, including my mother's church group, my former classmates, and a handful of my brother's business contacts was not a miscommunication. It was a choice. Choices have different paperwork than misunderstandings. I did not return any of the calls. Margaret had suggested a formal meeting. Not at the house. I refused to go back to that building, as a daughter expected to absorb whatever the room needed from her. If they wanted access to me now, it would be in a conference room with neutral walls and a table between us, where the conversation would be shaped by documents instead of volume. They came on a Wednesday morning. My brother arrived first, in the jacket he wore when he needed to feel larger than the room. My sister-in-law sat beside him, with her phone face down, which was the first time I had seen her willingly separate from it. My mom came in last, and she looked at me the way she had not looked at me in years, uncertain, which meant paying attention for once. My aunt had invited herself, and took the chair nearest the door, which I noted. Margaret was already seated. I came in after all of them, set a folder on the table, and did not apologize for being the last one in. My brother spoke first. He usually did. I want to be clear, he said, which is what people say when they want to set the terms before the evidence arrives. Whatever legal thing you've started here, it stops today. You want to talk about the house. We talk about it like adults. You don't send process servers to your own family's door. Your family, I said. Or the house you've been living in without my consent for 16 months? His jaw tightened. I opened the folder. The first page was a screenshot of the Instagram reel, with the timestamp, caption, and comment section printed clearly. I slid it to the center of the table where everyone could see it. Then I put down my mother's liked comment. Then my brother's reshare. Then the reshare from the woman at church. Then a printed compilation of every comment that had been made before I screenshot, and the posts were eventually taken down. 43 comments, the worst ones highlighted in yellow. I'm going to read some of these out loud, I said. Not for drama. Because you said things in public that you should be willing to hear out loud in a room. My sister-in-law started to speak. Margaret raised one hand without looking at her, and she stopped. I read them. Slowly, evenly, without inflection. 12 of them. The laughter emojis rendered as text sound different when you say them in a conference room. The word unemployed sounds different when the person it was applied to is sitting across from you with 2 years of case files on a hard drive in her bag. The phrase "some people never grow up" loses its casual cruelty when you take it off a screen and make 4 people hear it in adult air. My brother went still somewhere around the 4th one. My mom stopped looking at the table and started looking at me. When I finished, I put the first page of the spreadsheet down. 2 years, I said. These are the utility accounts I maintained, because I set them up when the gas was about to be cut off and nobody else handled it. These are the insurance renewals I processed. This is the water heater I paid for in April. These are the 2 equipment loan payments I covered when the account was 30 days past due. I didn't know you did that, my brother said. His voice had changed register. I know, I said. That was part of the problem. I slid the next page across. These are the registered agent filings I handled for your LLC for 18 months. These are the certificate of insurance renewals I pulled together for the Elmwood Properties contract. Twice. My sister-in-law looked at the paper for a long moment. Something moved across her face that I had never seen there before. It was not quite shame, but it was adjacent to shame, and it was honest. We didn't know you did all of that, she said finally, and her voice was smaller than I had ever heard it. No, I said. You filmed my bedroom instead. My mom made a sound that was not quite a word. I looked at her directly for the first time since we had all sat down. Mom, you liked the comment from Linda Chen that said some people never grow up. You hit that button while I was asleep 3 feet away from you, in the middle of a shift that paid for the insurance on this family's home. Her face broke in a way that was genuine. I had seen my mother perform crying before. This was not that. I didn't know, she said. I know you didn't, I said. I should have told you. I kept things quiet because it felt easier than being dismissed. That was a mistake on my part, but not knowing doesn't undo what happened. My brother leaned forward. What do you want, Rachel? What is it that you actually want here? It was a transactional question. People ask it when they want to know the price and skip the part where they have to acknowledge what they purchased. I want the posts removed, I said. Not just hidden, removed, and any reshares you have the ability to take down, taken down. I want direct contact with me to go through Margaret for anything related to the property or the business arrangements. I want 60 days to decide what I'm doing with my share of the house, and I want that time without pressure, guilt trips, or family members calling my aunt to negotiate on their behalf. I looked at my aunt when I said that last part. She had the decency to look at her hands. And, I said, I want you to understand, not agree with, not apologize for, just actually understand that there is a difference between someone who is struggling and someone who is invisible. I was never struggling. I was invisible. And I let that happen by staying quiet too long. That's over now. My brother sat back. He looked older than he had when he walked in, which was not an insult. It was the look of someone whose assumptions had just cost them something real and were beginning to understand the invoice. Margaret walked them through the property options, the business insurance timeline, the registered agent grace period, and the loan situation. She did it without drama, which was worse for them than drama would have been. Drama allows people to be victims of tone. Facts do not. My sister-in-law asked, very quietly, whether there was any possibility I would continue as registered agent through the end of the Elmwood contract year. I told her I would consider it on paper, as a formal arrangement with documented responsibilities and compensation, not as a family favor extended indefinitely in exchange for nothing. She nodded. It was the most honest nod I had ever seen from her. When the meeting ended, I stood up first. I took a single item from the inside pocket of my jacket, a spare key to the house, the one I had kept on my ring for 2 years out of a habit that felt like responsibility, and I set it on the table in front of my mother. Grandma left that house to both of us because she trusted me to protect it, I said. I have been doing that. What you decide to do with the next 60 days is up to you. Margaret has my number. Then I picked up my folder and walked out. In the elevator, my hands were shaking, not from regret. From the particular physical response the body has when something it has been bracing against for years is finally, actually, over. Some kinds of relief feel like dropping weight. You forgot you were carrying until your shoulders unhinge, and you realize how long you have been standing crooked. I did not cry. I got in my car, drove to a diner 2 blocks from my apartment, ordered eggs and black coffee, and sat in a booth by the window watching the city move around itself with total indifference to everything that had just happened. The calls continued for 4 more days. My brother transitioned from urgent to careful, which told me he had started to understand his actual position. My sister-in-law texted once, briefly, to say the real and all reshares had been deleted. My mom left a voicemail that was the hardest to listen to. Not because it was manipulative, but because it wasn't, she said. She had been thinking about what I said about being invisible, and she didn't have a good answer for it yet, but she was trying to find one. I saved that one separately. I did not rush back into communication. I let Margaret handle the logistics. I went to work at 11 each night, traced the numbers other people tried to hide, and came home in the early morning to an apartment that was quiet in the way that honest places are quiet, not empty, just mine. 3 weeks later, I agreed to continue as registered agent for my brother's LLC through the end of the contract year, under a formal service agreement with a modest monthly fee that Margaret drew up in 2 pages. My brother signed it without arguing about the fee, which told me more about his growth in that month than anything he could have said. I did not move back into the house. I did not forgive everything at once. Because forgiveness is not a document you sign at a meeting, it is something that accumulates slowly, in small, honest moments, when people demonstrate over time that they have actually changed direction. What I can tell you is this. I used to believe that being useful was the same as being valued. I managed accounts and signed guarantees, and pulled insurance certificates at midnight because I thought that proximity to the people depending on me meant they saw me. It doesn't. People who need you can be entirely blind to you at the same time. Need and visibility are not the same thing, and I had spent 2 years confusing one for the other. My grandmother understood something I had to learn the hard way, that love without documentation is just an intention, and intentions do not survive contested estates or public humiliation, or the moment someone points a camera at your life and decides the view from outside is funnier than the truth inside. She left me half a house, not because she wanted me to use it as leverage, but because she wanted me to know that my presence, my actual, specific presence mattered enough to protect in writing. It took a 90-second Instagram reel for me to finally believe her. So let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with it for a moment before you scroll past. If the people closest to you found out tomorrow, what you actually do in the quiet hours, the work you don't talk about, the things you hold together that nobody sees, would they be surprised? And if they would, what does that tell you about who they've decided you are versus who you actually are? You don't owe anyone a permanent role in your story just because they were cast in the early chapters. And you do not have to keep covering the cost of people who only call you useful when something needs covering. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply stop explaining yourself and let the paperwork speak.